Hello everyone, my name is Chris Titley and welcome to the FinTech Australia podcast. The FinTech Australia podcast takes listeners on a deep dive across the FinTech industry in Australia, focusing on the challenges, opportunities and big stories our community faces. Let's get to today's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here. As part of the FinTech Australia podcast, I'm joined by David Marsh, Principal Industry Consultant of Payments at Endava. David, great to chat, and thanks. Nice to meet the other night, but good to chat now for a podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. Great to be here.
Now, David, for the listeners out there that may not have heard of Endava, do you want to give a bit of an overview of the business itself and your involvement here from a local level?
Yeah, absolutely. So Endava has been around since around the year 2000, so a little over 20 years old, 23 years old. Formerly known as Concise in the UK, so it's headquartered in the UK. And since then, it's grown into a global company. So we're in about 60 odd cities around the world now, listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And the business is very much around software engineering, so a software engineering consultancy. And we help clients with modern technologies. So helping them move perhaps from legacy systems or develop new innovative products. Essentially, we can assist anyone from an idea all the way through to working software. And we've been doing that for quite a few years around the world. And I guess about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago now, Endava made a decision to expand into Asia Pacific. And I've been with the company a little over 2 years.
And David, from that decision to expand, obviously seeing an opportunity and a market here in APAC, I mean, your role at the company, is it to do with sort of banks? Is it enterprise? Is it FinTech? Where does that all sit?
Yeah, absolutely. So Endava as a company, about 60% of our business is based around the payments industry. So globally, we service a lot of banks, FinTechs, payment service providers, schemes. And so that's a business that's grown to be probably the largest part of the business. But within the business, there are other domains like wealth, insurance, retail and mobility. So there are other aspects to the business, but payments is by far, I guess, one of the major focal areas. And so my role as principal industry consultant for payments is really to be the eyes and ears on the ground in Australia, and making sure we're relevant to organizations here. And so I guess Endava's business is perhaps slightly different from a typical software engineering business in that in every different region around the world, we have industry experts that bring the domain expertise, and then we couple that with the expertise in software engineering practices to be able to help people bring products to market.
Fantastic. Now, payments is always very topical on the FinTech Australia podcast, and everyone's got their views on different types of payments, global trends, as well as different solutions for different payment types. From a global point of view, there are different sort of, I suppose, competitive advantages of jurisdictions in terms of, for instance, QR payments is very strong in Asia and not so strong here, etc. But you are a payments expert, so I believe that there's a report that's just been released in Australia by yourself and the company called the 4 Key Trends in Payments. We would love to delve into that. Would you want to get right into what you're seeing in terms of the current trends in payments here in Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. So Endava does produce a lot of thought leadership material. So we have reports around the world that focus on different domains. The specific report we've just released this month, as you mentioned, is the 4 Key Trends in Payments. And it follows the back of a report we produced last year. So year on year, we're sort of checking in on these trends that we've identified and looking at the activity in the local market. So specifically this year, the report looks at real-time payments, looks at super apps, it looks at payment orchestration as well, and the last one slips my mind.
It was the evolution of payments acceptance.
How could I forget that?
That's okay. No, it's fine. I know that you could recite to me the name of my kids and I'd forget sometimes. Let's go in it one by one, if you don't mind, and sort of get into the 4 trends that have been identified. We'll start with the first one, being real-time payments, something which was called out in 2022 as a trend, but you want to go into what's changed in the last 12 months or so?
Yeah, absolutely. So we called it out last year, and I guess we probably haven't seen as much traction with real-time payments as I think everybody, certainly I imagine everybody on the fintech in the fintech industry would like to see. But I think in 2023, I think that's going to change. Obviously, there's been pressure from the Reserve Bank for the major banks to bring solutions to market, and certainly from my background. So prior to working with Endava, a number of roles ago, I actually worked within the institutional banks of Commonwealth Bank and Westpac, and I guess from a corporate payables and receivables perspective, I think there is huge potential for services like Pay2, but also for real-time payments more broadly. When I step back and I look at Endava's work globally, so Endava's supporting real-time payment rails in 9 different countries around the world, and you can see that there's progression on real-time payments as they become ubiquitous, not only for businesses but also for consumers. And I think what we've seen in Australia is I think we're starting to get some traction now from a retail perspective, although the typical man on the street doesn't know that he's using NPP. And I think what we're about to embark on though is more real-time payments in B2B payments and B2C payments as well.
Just on that point, do you think it's driven by corporates first, then retail, or retail first, driven by corporates? For instance, go out to dinner on a Friday night. Someone wants to fix you up. I mean, some banks come through instantly, and some come on Tuesday in terms of the money. And it's still this whole, I'll just send me here's my BSB and account number, send it to you on a text message. It's archaic, but it's still what happens in my world of people in their early 40s. So what needs to change there? Is it the businesses that then go, this is instant, and therefore they get paid quicker and whatnot from a supply chain, and they tell their customers, basically you're helping a business getting paid quicker by consuming there? Or is it coming from the people like myself that go out to dinner and still use BSB and account numbers to split bills?
To be honest, I think most people have no idea between NPP and direct entry. They don't know how their payments are routed. And I think that was probably by design with the banks, right? You tend to go into your banking app and it says pay to mobile number or pay to an individual. And so I think the original thought going into that was the consumer doesn't need to know the underlying rails.
Okay. Yep.
My personal view is I'm not sure if that's really the case, because as you mentioned, people don't know what's happening. And sometimes, for example, I see a confirmation of payee a notification that pops up and says, you're paying David Marsh and here's his account details. And other times they don't. And like you said, sometimes the payment happens quickly and sometimes it happens slowly. So I kind of feel that it may have been a better idea to actually give people some transparency in terms of how their payments are processed. But that hasn't happened. So we're in a situation now where I think, payments are being made, but the typical consumer doesn't know how they're getting used. And I think for particularly for small merchants and sole traders who could be using MPP more broadly, there is an education gap there. And if rather than giving people BSB an account, a small merchant or a market stall trader could be giving them an email address or a mobile phone number. I think that would probably drive pickup.
Yep.
But I guess back to your earlier question in terms of business or consumer first, in Australia we've gone consumer first. There's no doubt, but the business piece is about to happen. And I think what's important for business is not just the speed of the transaction, because most businesses want to receive money quickly but pay it out slowly. But I think what's really important is the data that comes along with the payment. And in market today, if you look across institutional banking offerings, I think there is a desire for corporates to be able to reconcile payments down to an invoice level. And at the moment, there are a few solutions out there. Typically, corporates might pay for some sort of matching solution, or the services in market called off-system BSB, if you're familiar with what that is. But essentially, it's a mechanism of trying to map a payment to a customer. And so I think there's real opportunities here for business to be able to get that. And what's more, it's an industry standard as well. So those corporates won't be tied to a specific bank's reconciliation solution. They'll be able to move banks. And in theory, they won't need to go out to all their customers like they do today with direct debit. They'll be able to shift banks quite seamlessly.
There you go. Lots happening in that real-time payments sector, and a big 23 to come, as you've pointed out in the report. Trend number 2, the rise of the super app. And again, in your report says one of the more contentious 2022 trends. 2023, let's talk about the rise of the super app. We've seen some offshore competitors, the global wallet, things like Revolut. We had the sort of merger and then demerger of SwiftX with Superhero, and a few other banking apps trying to add more value to their consumers. But let's talk about this trend.
Yeah, so I guess this is a super apps word's been kicking around for a little while. And if you look at Asia, clearly super apps have taken off there. You've got Grab and Gojek. Australia is quite different in terms of it's got a mature landscape. So there isn't quite the same opportunity for some of those fintech apps to get the same traction as they've got in other regions. But I think that super apps will get traction here. There's too much on offer for them not to, in terms of, mobile phone usage now at the point of sale is becoming very commonplace. I think AusPayNet had some statistics in their report that came out last year about the number of people that preferred to use mobile wallets at the point of sale. So you have this innovation platform that sits there. You've got the consumer data right, which is basically, still in its infancy, but presents the opportunity to be able to ingest more data into that transaction. So, comparison apps and things like that. And then you've got privacy regulation and digital identity, which is another couple of key factors, which I think will slowly start to drive a thought process away from, data is the new oil to perhaps maybe we just minimize the amount of data that we have and we retain, and we can use things like digital identity, for example. So I think if those things come together, then you sort of start to get to this place where the consumer really needs an app that they can consent to data sharing, and they can not only make a payment, but they can also do other things at the same time. So, I mean, Woolworths have their everyday rewards app, for example, and through a QR code payment, you can basically do the payment and
at the same time do the rewards. Then you overlay another system, everything sort of updates. I think that's something which I feel like is needed, and we're moving towards that. I see the founder of ChatGPT, Sam Altman's working on some sort of project about proof of identity and the way that you can sort of fast track ideas or fast track something to be used across multiple systems, not just payments. So I think that is a rising trend.
Yeah, well, I mean, even in Australia, later this year we should see Connect ID come to market, right? And so I think the simple use case that people can identify is that age-restricted products, right? Whether you're buying a case of beer or whatever, I think that's a sort of the most simple use case that sits out there that I think you'll maybe start to see these solutions come into play.
Trend number 3, the evolution of payments acceptance. We've seen multiple ways of paying for various things, including a pair of jeans and whatnot over the last 12 months, 2 years, 18 months, particularly from the dramatic uptake of buy now, pay later. Let's talk about what's happening there.
Yeah, so buy now, pay later, that's an interesting topic. Obviously, we've seen some consolidation this year from buy now, pay later. But what it does represent is that the consumers are open to using alternate services that have other features, right? Whether it helps them break their payment up into different installments. And so if you're a merchant, that starts to present some challenges in terms of how you accept these. International borders have opened, so we expect to start seeing inbound travelers coming in. If they're coming in from Asia, then cards maybe not their first choice of payment. I saw an article this morning that was saying that WeChat, for example, is starting to support the digital yuan for transactions. And so I think that for a merchant, it's starting to introduce some complexity there in terms of how do you accept all these payments. And there are solutions popping up that are helping merchants with that, and they're able to offer all sorts of features. So it's not just a basic commoditized merchant acquiring solution. It is a feature-rich solution that maybe allows you to bring a number of payment methods together and maybe helps you with the reconciliation of that and reporting as well.
David, from a macro point of view, I did a lot of interviews in 2020. I think probably about 40 to 50 ones on FinTech per se, and there was a massive trends, obviously, during these lockdowns that people were thinking of. One is that cash is dead, dying, about to go. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that. And secondly, it was to do with the credit card. And the credit card was like, okay, this is 20% rates is no longer consumer friendly. The consumer's fighting back. Look at buy now, pay later. Look at other things. But we've had 10 interest rate rises in a row. We've had lots of different macro trends. We're now no longer in lockdown and we're more free, as you said, and travel borders have opened up. Have you got any thoughts on those two particular items?
So credit cards. Credit cards. Australia is the card infrastructure is everywhere, right? 900,000 terminals. So debit cards and credit cards, I think, are here to stay. And if you start to look at some of the buy now, pay later solutions, a lot of them did start to associate a card with their transaction, right? And I think that's very much about trying to tap into the existing acceptance infrastructure that's out there. So I think cards will be around forever. But I think NPP presents some interesting opportunities. And I guess coming back to the original point around consumer education, I think that it would be, in the ideal world, consumers would understand the benefits of the different payment types, right? So, in theory, you could accept an account-to-account payment for all sorts of things, like buying things online. But the reality is, for someone like me who's been in payments for a little while, I'm still going to preference the credit card for that because I'm conscious there's some consumer protections there.
Yep.
And so it'll be interesting to see if we start to see new solutions built on top of the MPP rails that maybe are an account-to-account payment, but have some sort of consumer protection component, maybe look and feel a little bit more like a card payment. So I don't think card payments will go away, but I think that the discussions around cards and different rails are changing more from a discussion around the rails, but more around the other components that make up a card payment. So things like consumer protection, things like that.
And on the cash topic, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did see an article on LinkedIn the other day that was suggesting that cash should be gone within a couple of years or something. I don't think that will be the case. I think that there are proportions of the Australian society which still rely on cash. My parents are one of them.
Yep.
And you can't cut that off.
Yep.
And so I think what will happen is we'll see a continued decline of cash as most people move away to digital wallets. But there'll be an underlying requirement for cash in some shape or form. If I was to speculate what will happen, I think that it will become harder and harder to operate with cash as an individual. You start to go into shops and they'll turn you away.
No. Yeah.
I wonder if at some point in the future we'll see a situation where the government or someone steps in and says businesses of a certain size maybe must accept cash potentially. If you look at internationally, I think in Europe and in the UK, they're starting to address this a little bit, or at least explore concepts like the digital pound and the digital euro. And so I think there's opportunities there to have some sort of digital solution that's complementary to cash. But what quite that will look like in Australia, I don't know.
We're still quite early. Yeah, that's right.
We're still quite early on in that journey.
And last but not least, trend number 4, the payment orchestration platform as a service. As a service was a buzzword. Buzz 3 words. Buzz 3 words about 2 or 3 years ago in equity markets because everything seemed to be as a service, whether it be software, banking, you name it, fitness, lots of different things. Let's talk about that trend number 4.
Yeah, so I guess if you take all the complexity of everything we've just chatted about, it's crazy. It's hard for organizations to keep up, and so the orchestration and the as a service, I guess, trends are very much about people responding to that. So if I look at the sort of solutions that Endava develops, so we develop everything from soft POS through to payment gateways and e-commerce solutions, and increasingly, I guess what we see is there's a build versus buy discussion as part of trying to create a new product or offering, and through that discussion, there's got to be a decision made about just how complex is this, right? And is it the area that we really want to play? And so you look at things like perhaps fraud solutions and KYC. You've got to go really quite deep to be able to deliver those, and you've got to keep them updated. And maybe it's not what the customer wants to do. So you start to see them then tap into cloud-based services, and we're seeing that a lot more where people are stitching together different parts of cloud-based services to be able to deliver an end-to-end customer experience. The customer journey is fantastic. In the background, they're able to call out at different points to use different services, and it helps them, I guess, deliver at speed, and it helps them target where they want to use their investment, and deliver fantastic offerings.
David, 4 big topics there on the trends from 2023. Obviously, lots happening, lots of different moving parts, lots of different companies playing in that space. One final question to you about FinTech broadly in Australia. We're on the FinTech Australia podcast. Are you excited about the application use and the entrepreneurialism of the sector and what may yet to come?
Yeah, I'm super excited. I think Australia is super innovative country, and perhaps punches above its weight when you look at our population. I see that I see some fantastic products and services that get created. I think one challenge for Australia is that from a regulatory perspective, we're not big enough necessarily to drive the conversation on a global scale, and so we do tend to follow Europe. From you look at open banking, you look at real-time payments. On one hand, that gives us a second mover advantage, but on the other hand, I guess the challenge it presents is that some of the fintechs that start overseas sort of get to mature their products and bring them over here. And you're seeing that a little bit with, some of the topics we've touched on. Everyone will be aware that there's a few European companies that sort of eye Australia and the Asia Pacific as an expansion market. So for me, I would love to see Australian fintech exporting the other direction and getting some Australian innovation spreading across the world globally. And Australia has had some success there. Buy Now Pay Later has been an interesting story, certainly a lot of passion behind it. If we can sort of have that same innovation and same drive to deliver Australian innovation overseas across a broad range of fintech solutions, for me, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, no, for sure. Great point, David. Thanks so much for chatting today about through this payment report that your company has produced. Very interesting. We could talk all day about it. Lots of different trends happening. Let's see how 2023 comes, and I'm looking forward to interviewing in 24 in regards to the 4 trends, or maybe even more trends in terms of payments, and look forward to catching up shortly in person, hopefully at a FinTech Australia event.
Yeah, I look forward to it, Chris.
Thanks for listening to the FinTech Australia podcast. I'm your host, Chris Titley. The FinTech Australia podcast is a collaboration between FinTech Australia and Sub11. For more information about membership options, news and the events coming up, jump on to the FinTech Australia website. Have a great day. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.